Okay, so today the lesson is about cataclysmic outcomes of plate tectonics. So I've sort of entitled this lesson Volcanoes, Tsunamis, and Earthquakes, oh my. So we'll start with volcanoes. The definition, the official definition of a volcano is a rupture in the Earth's crust that allows hot lava, volcanic ash, and gases to escape from a magma chamber below the surface. So where do they happen? We talked a little bit about it yesterday, or not yesterday, but Monday when we talked about plate tectonics. And so when tectonic plates are diverging, coming apart, or converging, coming together, and then occasionally in other areas when there's stretching and thinning of the plates, or where some hot spots form, where melted, less viscous, like thinner magma is forced up through thicker rock. Sometimes hot spots will form and you'll get like a random volcano. So that's sort of like the definition and where you'd find them. So let's get into specifics. So what types of volcanoes are there? First, there are shield volcanoes. And shield volcanoes are named for the sort of broad, almost flat shape. So it looks like a shield, like you would see a knight carry. So like it's just sort of wide and almost flat. It's just a big kind of dome. And what happens here is when the lava comes up and flows out, it's low in viscosity. It's sort of thin and runny, well, as far as magma goes anyway, or lava goes anyway. And so it can really flow a long way. And so it ends up forming a very flat, very hard shield-like structure on top. So that's a shield volcano. These are not typically the type of volcanoes that explode. And you'll see them more in the ocean than on continents. Islands like Hawaii, like the Hawaiian volcanic chain, is a series of shield volcanoes. And then also in Iceland as well. So Hawaii, Iceland. Okay, so that's shield volcanoes. I almost forgot to mention about shield volcanoes. You see these often along divergent plate borders, plate boundaries, like in the Mid-Atlantic Ridge, where the plates are pulling apart and lava is oozing up between and forming an underwater mountains. Those are often shield type volcanoes. Next up is a lava dome. And this is just like it sounds. It ends up being sort of a dome shape. Because when the lava comes up, some magma chamber down here, right? There's lava, like oddly purple lava. When the lava comes up, it's very viscous. It's very thick and kind of sticky, and so it doesn't flow very far. And since it doesn't flow very far, it ends up with a large dome shape instead of like the flat shape that we saw with the shield volcano. Dome volcano is common, or one of the more famous ones actually is Mount St. Helens, Mount St. Helens. So it can produce very violent explosions like this one did. And then there's the most dangerous type of volcano, for humans anyway, And that's known as the stratovolcano or the composite volcano. And it's named for the layers that make it up. So, you know, here's a magma chamber down here, and there's lava coming up. And it ends up forming this sort of steep shape. But then there are layers of ash, and then, let's see, there's layers of ash and cinders that have been ejected from the magma chamber before, and it just ends up forming these layers until pressure builds and it like explodes. So one of, I guess the most well-known here is Mount Fuji in Japan. So like, you can really tell the difference between a shield volcano, which might have a slope of, let's say, 5 to 10 degrees, and a stratovolcano, which might have a slope of like 30 to 35 degrees. It's very steep. This is exaggerated, but that's what it kind of looks like. So how does a volcano form around a convergent plate boundary? So we've got the oceanic plate, right? And it's coming along under here, and then it goes down into the ocean, right? And it's kind of thin, right? That's our oceanic plate. And then we've got the thicker continental plate. That's kind of forcing it down. And what's happening right here is twofold, right? Well, we've got a deep trench here. There's a lot of pressure, a lot of friction, and something else interesting. There is water that gets released from this plate. And when that happens, it lowers the melting temperature of the wedge of mantle in here. It makes it easier to melt, and it does. It creates magma, and it tends to be really thick because of what's in it. So it a lot of times doesn't even make it to the surface, but when it does, it kind of ooches up in here through the plate, and the plate kind of crumples a little bit, right? And then we have volcano. These are the types of volcanoes you see that sort of surround the Pacific Ocean, called the Ring of Fire. It's not just a Johnny Cash song. Who knew? And there's one other type of volcano that you might sometimes hear about, like on the Weather Channel or like History Channel, or you know, one of those other channels where they try and get you really excited and scared about something that will probably never happen in your lifetime. So this is a super volcano. It usually has an enormous crater, called a caldera. Other volcanoes have large craters called calderas, but this one is unusually enormous. Sometimes, you know, it could be like the size of the state of Texas even, or bigger. So these are really dangerous because they cool the temperature all over the world for years, just because of the volume of stuff that's released into the atmosphere, like ash. It blocks sunlight and causes cooling in the atmosphere, so it can have really devastating effects. However, it's really hard to identify because of the massive scale of destruction, and because it hardly ever happens. So there's really not a lot to say about it, quite honestly, but you may have heard of it already, and I don't know, it won't be anything to worry about until it happens, and then, well, we're all in trouble.